What's up, everyone? So
Hello.
my name is Gabe. I am the substitute moderator here for someone more qualified than me who couldn't make it. Full disclosure, I am one of the co-creators of Pinto, but of course, will do my best to just try to put you guys on your stumps and get the conversation going as much as possible. So
Thanks for stepping up.
So I think, sorry, what did you say?
Thanks for stepping up.
Oh, of course. Yeah, my pleasure.
Not the first time either, by the way. So he's a professional substitute moderator at this point.
So why don't you guys just say your name and the name of your project first, and then I'll open it up for you guys to speak for a little longer.
Sure. Hey, hi everyone. I'm Cyrille. I'm core-contributor to Aladdin DAO, which is the DAO behind several protocols, including FX protocol. And we build trustless and decentralized stablecoin. Yeah.
Bert from Reflexer. We made like a floating peg stablecoin a while back, and now we're building a $1 immutable coin on Ethereum.
Ben from Pinto. It's a credit-based trustless stablecoin on Base, pegged to the dollar.
So I think the way I want to start this is to give you guys each a little bit of time to take a couple minutes and talk about the context of how you've seen the development of decentralized stablecoins over time, and then placing your project within how you see that history having played out. What's your guys' role in moving the space forward, given what you've seen and what you've learned so far?
Should I start? Yeah.
Please.
So yeah, FX was created in reaction of the USDC peg in March 23. Aladdin at this point already had 2 protocols running, and the treasury was mostly exposed to USDC because at that point, and it's still the case, USDC is the most liquid stablecoin on Ethereum. And the alternative that's at this point weren't reliable. I mean, the peg would fluctuate a lot, and so USDC was the easiest way to go. And today, it's unfortunately still the case. So Aladdin tried to find another compromise, because it's always about compromises, and created FX protocol. V1 was launched in August 23, and V2 in January 25. And I believe that now we find a pretty good approach to the stablecoin trilemma that maybe I'll have the chance to explain later. But the idea is to have a stablecoin that is trustless, has a very strong peg, and capital efficient enough, at least, for users to use it.
I feel free to speak a little more about the model. I think it would be good color.
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to explain how FX works is to look at the CDP design, because at the end of the day, it's a CDP, an evolved CDP that has better capital efficiency and very strong peg keeping by design. So the way it works, there's basically 2 kinds of users. The first one is the users who want to get leverage. They can get up to 7x leverage of BTC and ETH with minimal funding costs or borrowing costs and minimal liquidation risk. Instead of paying recurring borrowing costs, they just pay one-time opening and closing fee. And instead, regarding the liquidation, we have a very progressive liquidation mechanism that prevents any hard liquidation, basically. So it lets us deliver up to 88% LTV, which is pretty capital efficient, being 100% on-chain. And for the users, in a way, it's some kind of a zero-stress leverage. They can have a set-it-and-forget-it leverage position. They can also just borrow FXUSD for a one-time fee while being protected from liquidation. And on the stable side, we have a very strong peg keeping mechanism, which is called the stability pool. People can stake both FXUSD and USDC, and when they do so, they help peg keeping FXUSD to make sure it's always very close to 1. And to be incentivized to do so, they earn most of the protocol revenue. Since we launched early 25, these guys earned $7 million of organic fees generated by the protocol. There's no point bullshit, there's no token inflation. This is just organic and aligning people's interest. So on one hand, you have the more, I would say, degens, or people who are okay with volatility and risk. They can take leverage. On the other side, there's more risk-averse people that just want stable yield, and we just align them, basically.
Thank you for the color.
Can I ask a couple questions about that?
Yeah, sure.
So one, the stablecoin f of x USD is collateralized by which assets? It's the perp positions and
So
underlying, or it's the offsetting perp positions? How does that work?
FXUSD is collateralized by wrap staked ETH and wrap Bitcoin only. It's a CDP, so it's over collateralized. The main difference with other CDPs we've seen so far is the liquidation mechanism. While on, for instance, let's say Aave, or on Aave, when you borrow USDC against ETH, for instance, whenever your position crosses 80% LTV, 50% of your debt could potentially be repaid at the market with a 10% penalty. On FX, whenever your position crosses 88% LTV, the protocol just puts it back at 88% so that it never reaches 95% hard liquidation LTV. And we managed to do this in a profitable way for the liquidators by aggregating the whole liquidity as one giant CDP. While as a user, you just have a receipt for your position on that giant CDP. So liquidators can liquidate as little as a couple of dollars on your position, because they will have liquidated dollars on other people's positions as well at the same time.
But so the stablecoin is collateralized by just the wrap staked ETH and the BTC.
Yep.
How do the perps derive their value then on top of that? Or it's independent?
When we say perp, it's actually we deliver a perp UX, but in the backend is a CDP looping using a flash loan. So it's the same, like the CDP and the collateralization. It's the perp. It's the same thing.
And it's long only exposure?
Long, short. Yeah, you can get both.
Wonderful.
Or just CDP, so you don't get don't get directional exposure. You just keep your ETH or BTC exposure and borrow stable to do whatever you want.
I guess the thing I'm trying to get at is, with respect to the short exposure, is there some sort of offsetting element where you get more capital efficiency or scalability from that? Like, if I wanted to go short, what would that transaction look like?
The transaction looks like, when you want to go short, it's basically your collateral, you're borrowing ETH against your FXUSD. So basically, the collateral backing when you open the short, the collateral backing FXUSD is sold to create the short position, basically. Just like on Aave, but it's simpler because there's only two collaterals, so there's also less risk in a way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. It's very interesting.
Bert?
Yeah, so $RAI is heavily inspired by Reflexer's RAI and Liquidy's LUSD in bold, if you all are familiar with those. RAI was a floating peg stablecoin. You guys might have heard of it. That was recently shut down by the DAO. The inspiration for RAI was USC independence, had a floating peg, and also low governance. Wasn't quite immutable, but very minimal that governance can change. And so I was inspired based on what we learned off of RAI, the RAI's floating peg, and also the immutability of Liquidy, to sort of take principles from both of those and then add some new things. So $RAI will be a $1 stablecoin. I have to say that because if I had a Reflexer t-shirt on yesterday, I'm telling people I'm building a stablecoin. Like, well, is it going to be floating? No, it's dollar coin, and will be immutable. And immutability sort of implies, you don't get the privilege of censorability. They sort of come hand in hand. And the vast majority of stablecoins on Ethereum are, regulated now. So I think that's attractive. I think the market is sort of underserved for people who want an immutable coin. So some innovations that we're going to have, if you're familiar with Liquidy, we will have automated rates, unredeemable troves. You can opt into, hey, your trove will not be redeemed against. The coin, like in Liquidy, can be redeemed for collateral. That's good, but the downside is if you're a trove owner, you lose exposure to your collateral. So we'll have an internal sort of rate market that allows people to, pay more, a dynamic rate to avoid redemption. What else? We'll have more collaterals, and we have a mechanism to deal with under-collateralized debt. So, yeah, that's it. We're plugging away at it and super excited about it.
Potentially, you buried the lead. What's the under-collateralized?
I'm sorry?
What's the under-collateralized element?
To deal with that?
Yeah, when you're saying if the CDP becomes under collateralized?
If one of the collaterals becomes the debt that's produced by the collateral is greater than the value in the system. So we'll basically divert fees, revenue and redemption fees, but also we have the floating par. We're incorporating that for stability. It's not gonna float much. It's just floating to bring the market back to $1. But in cases of like the floor dropping from under collateralization, it can correct that.
Makes a lot of sense.
So,
Go ahead, Ben.
good morning, everyone. Pinto is not a collateralized stablecoin. So the history is Pinto is the first fork of Beanstalk. For those of you that were around in DeFi summer, and that is downstream of empty set dollar, dynamic set dollar. If you go further back, basis. So there's a long history of credit-based stable coins. In this case, Pinto does not hold a tight peg. So it's comfortable with some volatility. And the trade-off space that Pinto operates in is in order to, as Cyrille was saying, the stablecoin trilemma, ultimately the trade-off is scalability for stability that Pinto makes. And so the thesis is, if you're going to use on-chain collateral in particular, there is a fundamental lack of scalability up to the scale of trillions of dollars. So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is talking about he wants to see trillions of stablecoins, and in his case, he wants them backed by treasuries. But ultimately, the demand for stablecoins is going to go to trillions. And we at Pinto hold the belief that if you want to have trillions of decentralized stablecoins, on-chain stablecoins, ultimately there's not enough collateral to meet trillions of dollars of demand. And even if you said, okay, the Bitcoin and Ethereum market caps are going to grow to trillions of dollars, the opportunity cost realized for locking up trillions of dollars of collateral is too high, such that the carrying cost, the borrowing cost for holding those positions would make it such that in practice, the stablecoins aren't usable. So Pinto takes a riskier approach designed to create scalability, where it makes a trade-off. It accepts some volatility, and instead of having backing due to collateral, it uses credit. So anytime the price of Pinto is too low, the protocol uses its own credit worthiness to try to create stability. It tries to borrow excess supply from the market. So there's lots of layers of incentives designed to minimize volatility, but the fundamental assumption that holders of Pinto are making is that the protocol is sufficiently creditworthy such that over time, the protocol will be able to borrow enough excess supply from the market to return the price to its value target of $1. So that's the short version of it.
Your first question was also about the evolution and how we've seen stablecoins evolve over time. And fortunately, I have to say that trustless stablecoins, ours we are building right now, is only 0.1% of all stablecoins. So we're building DeFi on one of the most decentralized infrastructure that actually allows trustlessness. But what everybody does is just being trusted product on top of this trustless infrastructure. And that's a shame. And I believe what we're building is important to be also supported by every other builders. And it's very important to put this forward now before it's too late and before people don't have the choice anymore to use decentralized products.
Thank you for saying that. And I think we should go deeper into that. I think it's just worth noting the privileged position we are to be able to speak on a decentralized stablecoin panel. So shout out Stable Summit. This year has been huge for centralized stablecoins, needless to say. So I think one question I want to ask is, you made the point, Bert, about immutability being an underserved part of the market in this case. So I guess the question, what to you guys is the value proposition for decentralized stablecoins to offer at this point in the market? Obviously for builders like ourselves, decentralization is a value, right? But how do you think that plays out in the market at this point?
I heard a few years ago, CDPs won't scale, and that's true, definitely true. There's a limit, but I don't think the market is homogenous. A lot of people don't care and they'll use the centralized stuff. That's fine. But I do think there is a core group of people that, don't want their coin to be able to be controlled or limited.
So Beanstalk famously was hacked due to a governance issue. So the immutability thing is something we've spent a lot of time studying. At this point, we are in the late stages of designing a new governance mechanism for on-chain governance while preserving immutability through forking, sort of taking the network native hard forking model and applying it to smart contracts, which is something in 2026 we'll be putting out more content towards. But when we talk, so I'm a big fan of the immutability element of what you're doing now. When it comes to what is the differentiator and why people might want a decentralized stablecoin or a trustless stablecoin, at some level, we are in generally a risk-off environment within stablecoins. I think there's a lot of trauma from what happened with Terra Luna. Obviously, a tremendous amount of value was lost, and arguably that was what set off the last bear market. And so, particularly when you're asking people to come further out on the risk spectrum, I think this is something we've experienced since we launched Pinto just about a year ago. There's a real, really, you guys are still doing this stuff? And ultimately, it may be that until the centralized stablecoins start to censor in a more active way, do people not care, right? So you look at what's happening with the US dollar, it was only as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war and the Biden administration's censorship of Russian assets that really at a global scale did people start to consider in a more serious way alternatives to the US dollar, even though it was a very similar dynamic. And so we may have to wait for that gun to be pulled, for that trigger to be pulled. At the same time, I think where we can potentially compete is on yield. So when it comes to mechanism design, I think what F of X is doing is quite brilliant. And obviously, you guys have started to generate very competitive rates. I think I saw as much as 14%, which is wonderful, right? So there's an interesting thing where you're really competing. The trade-off space that I view these stablecoins to be competing in is when you don't consider immutability and you don't consider centralization. For the majority of the market that clearly doesn't care, at least at this point in time, the trade-off space that you're operating in is volatility and yield. And so Pinto is at the far end of the spectrum where it's willing to accept a significant amount of volatility, even though it's designed to be as low volatility as possible without collateral, in exchange for higher yield. And so in this case, we have other mechanisms on stage as well that are designed to create some competitive yield. And the question is, what is that trade-off space? In Bert's case, there's some volatility that's accepted. In Pinto's case, there's infinite volatility that's accepted, although it's attempted to be minimized. And then F of X is generally stable, but there's also a competitive yield. So you can see there's a spectrum here if you think about volatility as a proxy for risk. In terms of risk versus reward, where yield is the reward. So ultimately, I think the way that our niche, less than 1% right now, is going to compete is through competitive yield, through interesting mechanism design. And that's a really cool space to be in, but it's still a bit of a desert. There's not too many of us out there. So it's honestly an honor to be on stage with you guys also trying to figure this out.
Definitely, and I think there's lack of education. As you said, there's a massive PTSD after what Luna has happened. One of the first questions people ask when I say we're building a decentralized stablecoin is it an algorithmic stablecoin? And I guess you must be struggling with that question because we're not doing an algorithmic stablecoin. But people got so shocked. So now the value perception of risk is higher for decentralized stablecoins than for centralized ones, while they do not rely on trust. So people would rather trust any black box entity in whatever black box country than something they can verify and audit all the time on-chain. And that's a total nonsense. And I'm very confident for our future because I'm absolutely certain that every centralized stablecoin would disappoint at some point. And it's already happened many times and will probably happen again, especially when tokenized carry trade sells himself as a stablecoin. It's probably going to disappoint at some point. And so I'm very confident in the others' failures to put us in front of the scene at some point. And what I believe also is that at the age of AI agents being about to take financial decisions for people and to generate yield and so on, these AI agents will have to find the best risk-reward strategies. And I really believe that AI agents would most likely not take the human execution risk when they can just verify everything with on-chain data, basically. So if we achieve to deliver at least similar yield than trusted solutions, then it's going to be a no-brainer for all these AI agents. And we actually deliver better yields with lower risks. So in my opinion, it's just a no-brainer for AI agents. So I'm very confident in the future, even if so far it's pretty hard after what happened with Luna and so on. It's pretty hard to convince with decentralization. And as you said, most people just don't care about decentralization yet. But at some point, I'm pretty sure there's a shift is going to happen, especially if we get support from big institutions such as the EF or people like that.
What a powerful thesis, right? The AI is actually going to lift up us.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
I think so, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the algo stable and people being scared. Ultimately, all of these systems run on an algo, but typically when you think about algo stables, you think about uncollateralized stablecoins. This was one of those things. So when we forked Beanstalk to create Pinto, if you look at the Beanstalk white paper, it's a credit-based stablecoin. If you look at the Pinto white paper, it's a low volatility money. So we tried quite hard to get away from the algo stable language because people are so traumatized. Ultimately, we've come back to it because it does feel like the crux of the issue.
This is the only algo stable design that worked so far, the one you're building on.
Thank you very much. Well, works is all relative, but we're definitely at the forefront and feel like it is working generally. So there is certainly some volatility. You look at the price today, it's about 38 cents or so, and you may say, well, that doesn't work at all. But if you look at what was Bitcoin's volatility its first year, what was Ethereum's volatility its first year, Pinto is incredibly competitive. So in the context of new currency, we feel like, it is working. So appreciate that you saying that.
Can you go over the archetypes in the system? Like CDP, you have the actors of the borrower and the holder, but I guess that's different with Pinto.
Yeah. So there's two sides to the market in Pinto or in these the type of credit-based stablecoin that we're building. You have depositors and you have lenders. So the depositors deposit either raw Pinto, just the Pinto, they deposit it in the protocol, or they can deposit LP tokens. And the depositors accrue something called stock. So one of the interesting things about systems like this is when you have some sort of endogenous value, these systems are highly reflexive, which means when the going is good, everyone piles in, everyone wants to participate in the high yield, but when the going is bad, everyone flees. And so one of the original innovations of Beanstalk was something called the stock system, which is a protocol native bank run minimization scheme. So the way it works is you accrue more stock over time, the longer that you're deposited in the system. And what this does is when you leave, in order to withdraw, you can withdraw at any time, you have to burn all of the stock that you've accrued over time. And so the idea is this prevents or minimizes bank runs by creating an opportunity cost for leaving and coming back in the form of all of the stock. Now, the thing about stock is you earn yield. When the protocol grows, when the price is too high, the protocol mints new currency to bring the price back down. Half of all supply increases, or just under half, go to paying stockholders pro rata. So half of the system is made up of these depositors that deposit Pinto or LP tokens into the system in order to earn yield. The other half are these creditors that I mentioned. So anytime the price is too low, the protocol tries to borrow Pinto from the market. it burns any Pinto that it borrows, and the creditors lend to the protocol the Pinto, and they receive back pods, which are the Pinto native debt asset. So the two halves of the whole are the lenders that reduce supply and the depositors that deposit either Pinto or LP. Now, just one other thing to mention. So one of the innovations of originally Beanstalk that has been refined by Pinto is something we call the convert system. So within the deposit facility, people are holding Pinto and LP. There is now a way to convert your LP to Pinto or your Pinto to LP while preserving or now even getting a bonus of stock for doing it at the right time. And the idea is if you remove Pinto from the liquidity pool, you actually increase the price due to the way that the price in the liquidity pool comes from the ratio of Pinto to non-Pinto value in the pool. So if you convert your LP to Pinto, it naturally brings the price up. So anytime the price is below the value target, in addition to trying to borrow from the market to reduce supply, the protocol tries to incentivize conversions from LP to Pinto. And vice versa, when the price is too high, the protocol tries to incentivize conversions of Pinto to LP to bring the price back down and minimize the amount of mints, if you will. So that's a very quick version of it, but that's the elements of the system.
Thank you.
So I think things have been pretty chummy up here on the decentralized stablecoin front. So we don't have too much time, but one question I have is, do you guys see there being a category winner here at the exclusion of others? We have 3 different models with different value props. How do you guys see this space shaking out in the short, medium to long term?
I wish you all success, guys, because I think it's important for us to stand together behind our trustlessness values rather than betting on another's failure. So I wish you guys success.
Likewise, I was going to say the same thing. Even just with our 1%, we have very different approaches. So I think we need to keep exploring and pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, and very different sources of utility. Ultimately, I think when it comes to creating a currency, I think you have to move away from the collateralized model. But you look at something like F of X protocol, it offers a very interesting way to get exposure. You pay a fixed fee when you open and close the positions, but then you can hold the position. There is just simply utility in something like that. So independent of the future of trillions of dollars of stablecoins, you look at something like that, there's definitely utility. I'm very interested in learning more about Bert's model.
Definitely.
I think until I do the deep dive, it's hard for me to comment about where it's all going to shake out. But obviously the RAI model with the volatile peg is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. In the short term, it seems like the market really wants dollars on chain, which is why Pinto targets the value of $1. But we are at the forefront collectively of this very experimental part of our space. And for me, the more that people are pushing the incentive design and creating new pockets of utility, and as you said, like trying to have the conversations to get institutions to change how they allocate capital slightly, this is all part of the process. So in my mind, it doesn't have to be Beanstalk, it doesn't have to be Pinto, as long as we're able to ultimately collectively create an on-chain, trustless source of currency that can be filling the medium of exchange and unit of account use case for money. That's really what matters. So I do think with currency, there is generally a winner take most thing. Like if you look at modern currencies, the US dollar has definitely won most. And then you have a lot of other fiat currencies that are much less important. So I think in the long arc of this thing, we will find there to be a winner, but it remains to be seen if one of the protocols that exist today will be the winner. It may be a future iteration on one of these models. I have the thesis that it will be a credit-based model. And so that's, this is the type of thing that will play itself out over time. But the important thing is that we continue to experiment.
Exactly.
And, not to get on my high horse or too high on my horse, if you will. But yesterday we were at Gabe and I were both at the Trustless conference. And the Ethereum Foundation just put out this trustless manifesto, talking in quite absolute terms that the only thing that matters is trustlessness. And you're only as trustless as your weakest link. And this is something that for me resonates, right? I've spent the past 5 years of my life trying to create a trustless currency because I feel very strongly that the dependence on these centralized stablecoins is a a total destroyer of the Ethereum value proposition. And there was a panel from the people that produced the manifesto, and we were able to ask a question about, how do you feel like centralized stablecoins compromises the trustlessness of Ethereum? And Vitalik's on the panel, and he doesn't say anything, and it hurts my soul. Ultimately, we need a culture of experimentation, and to me, it's totally appropriate to say, hey, right now, none of them have worked. We think the people working on them are a little crazy because it's a crazy idea. But this is the type of experimentation we need. And to get silence from Vitalik, it's one of those you can build the most trustless computer network. But at the end of the day, if the currency isn't trustless, what are we doing here, So it's, we're a little bit lonely here, gentlemen.
Yeah, but it's like, it must, in many fields, people think it's black or white. Yeah, we don't need to replace all the centralized stablecoins. It's fine to have centralized stablecoins and real-world assets on Ethereum, and Ethereum is probably the best place to build real-world assets. But it's not fine if decentralized alternatives don't exist anymore. I'm very happy that the EF published this trustless manifesto. We actually wrote the DeFi oath, and I was about to talk about it this week, but they published pretty much the same thing with the trustless manifesto. And I'm really glad that they finally also put this forward at the same time as they're trying to onboard real-world assets. So I guess Vitalik couldn't say much about centralized stablecoins because they're trying also to get more and more institutions and trusted products on Ethereum. But as long as they also promote alternatives and also put their words where the mouth is, I don't know if it's the exact way to say it, but it's already like a good beginning, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of pushback on the immutability from $, and so I was very relieved to see in the trustlessness manifesto the line it's very hard to do trustlessness, but we must strive towards it. So that was really motivating to see that in there. And I've been thinking about this stuff for 5 years too, and just that's part of my DNA. Pushing forward and making free stable coins, free currency.
Yeah, maybe this is probably too technical for the group, but we should talk about how to do the immutability and upgradability stuff. It's I agree with you, Cyrille, but at the same time, I think we could use a little push from the front,
I agree. We could definitely use it. And I believe even the guys building the trusted solutions, most of them are crypto natives or at least in the project, there are crypto natives that also share our values. They just made different choices in the product they build for probably many different reasons. But these guys could also stand with us and value the fact that decentralized solutions also need to be offered to the users. So we could get support from not only the EF but also the guys building the other products.
Yeah, you're much more diplomatic than I am. In my mind, we need the support, and ultimately, I look at the people that are doing the opposite and focus on the centralized stablecoins as unlikely to support because their financial incentives are no longer aligned with our values. So people may hold the values, but your actions are the thing that matters. And at this point, we're not really getting any of that. And I feel like you look at what happened with DAI, now Sky, that's the epitome of it, right? They started Ethereum collateralized and, hey, we want to scale. This is how we're going to do it. And now they're valueless. So, and they're huge now. So it's one of those.
Speaking of education, this is also a topic. Most people, when we talk about decentralized stablecoin, still believe that DAI is the decentralized stablecoin.
Yeah.
And there's
we need to do a better job as a group branding this stuff and educating people. Because I think, yeah, you're right. That's such a dated, talking about 5 years now, right? Like it's such a dated perspective, but ultimately people really, since Terra Luna, no one is talking about this stuff. So people just don't know.
Well, I'll just chime in and say that I'm quite inspired by all three of you. So thank you guys for building in this space. I think particularly in an industry which feels like the Wild West, and frankly, there's a lot of crap not being driven by utility or value, the values that are behind the cypherpunk movement. To me, this is important work. So grateful to be part of this project. And I think that it would be meaningful, at least from my perspective, for leaders in the Ethereum community to, if they're serious about building trustless systems, even when it's hard, okay, we can focus on centralized stablecoins to the extent that we need dollars now. But this is the hard work. So appreciate you guys on the frontier trying to make it happen. And, I know, Ben, you've been pretty open. We may break some eggs, but are we doing it in good faith? Are we being transparent? Are we honoring the values of the space? And are we going towards where we're supposed to be going towards? I think that's the important question to keep in mind. So we have about 4 minutes left. Want to just give you guys each a chance. Closing remarks. We're talking about education. We're talking about leading the conversation to try to get people to take our work seriously, in a space that has been marked by a couple failures, which have scared people. How can we give people courage that this is the right work? How can we give people tools to understand what they should do as they're trying to make sense of all this stuff? And what's a valuable thing to keep in mind? What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I'll try to not go too deep because that's a wide question. But I think blockchain allowed us to own our assets and to get more freedom. But I often say this, but most people don't want to hear it. But freedom comes with responsibility. So when we use and when you take custody of your assets, it comes with the responsibility to understand what's going on and what the risks are you're taking. And when you're using centralized assets again, then you're trusting someone and you're losing freedom and giving the responsibility of your assets to you don't even know who. And I think it's important if you want freedom, because most people want freedom but don't want the responsibility that comes with it. It's also important to embrace that responsibility and to accept it. I don't know if I'm exactly answering your question, but I think it's important for people to be happy to take that responsibility because this is what brings freedom.
Yeah, I'm interpreting.
Is it fucked up or?
No, I'm interpreting your answer to be that currency is an essential part of this story. Owning the currency, having a trustless currency.
Yeah, and I think it's trustless, so you basically really own it, and it's your freedom to own your money that no one can seize or freeze or control or. And so it also comes with the responsibility. So it's important as a responsible person to learn about it, learn about how it works and what value it brings. And if you want to experience it, I said we just made the one-time opening fee 0 for the next 7 days. So if you want to try to mint FXUSD,
free money.
It's probably the best moment to do so.
Thank you, Cyrille. So they're going to cut off our mic in 2 minutes. So if I could just have 1 minute from each of you guys.
Sure. I'm just still hanging on to what I thought crypto should be when I entered it, several years ago.
Beautiful.
That's my stake in the ground, immutable money that no one can control. That's what I thought it should be. But we sort of got to the point. It's like that Minions meme. Like, we have US dollars on chain. Oh, we have US dollars on chain. So $RAI is going to be an immutable stablecoin.
Thank you, Bert.
Beautiful. The arc of history is long, my friends. And I think when it's all said and done, particularly for folks like us, Bert, that are here for a long time and don't plan on going anywhere, I'm optimistic that ultimately we're going to figure it out. It is a little bit like alchemy, trying to create a new currency. And as we know, historically, people have said alchemists are crazy and it's impossible. But actually now, at the state of the art, people are actually performing alchemy. And so to me, it's quite an inspiring thing if you have a scientific approach, an experimental approach, and as you go deeper into your understanding of how the world actually works, in this case, it's a behavioral system, you can actually perform alchemy. So here's to trying to create new currency.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.